the readings for Saturday, July 15th. Sorry, guys, once again for the late upload today. I usually catch a quiet minute at the start of my day where I can record these on the weekends, but now my family was just up and at 'em right from the word go this morning. Yeah, got the car's oil changed, did some family activities, never caught a break, so I will try earnestly to not fall back into the old habit of this being the regular Saturday norm upload time. But just, yeah, because I'm a poor planner and didn't record these in advance, I could not catch an opportunity to until right now, later in the day. So forgive me for that. Hopefully it doesn't mess up y'all's routines too much. And without further ado, let's cut to the chase here and get to why you're listening. So, the epistle reading is from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 11 through 14, and chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love. These three, but the greatest of these is love. Pursue love and desire spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. For he who speaks in a tongue does not speak to men, but to God. For no one understands him. However, in the Spirit he speaks mysteries. But he who prophesies speaks edification and exhortation and comfort to men. He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself, but he who prophesies edifies the church. I wish you all spoke with tongues, but even more that you prophesied. For he who prophesies is greater than he who speaks with tongues, unless indeed he interprets, that the church may receive edification. All right. Some footnotes from the Orthodox Study Bible. So for chapter 13, verse 11, the scriptures differentiate between being dependent on God or childlike, as noted in Matthew chapter 18, verse 3, and being childish or immature. And actually we have a footnote here that is for verses 8 through 13. So a few verses before where we started reading today. You can read those first few verses in your own Bibles if you wish. But for verses 8 through 13, the gifts of the Spirit, wonderful as they are temporary and incomplete. They are for this age, while we are, quote-unquote, children, as noted in verse 11. But love continues into the age to come. It is eternal, complete, and fulfilling. For chapter 14, verse 1, we are to desire or want the gifts of the Spirit, but pursue the love of God. St. John Chrysostom notes the difference. Quote-unquote, chase love, he writes. Quote, make every effort, unquote, to retain her. To find this love, one, quote, strains himself and leaves not off until he lay a hold of it. For chapter 14, verse 2, in the Orthodox Church, what about one who speaks in a tongue? Historically, God judged the builders of the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9, dividing their unity by confusing their language. At Pentecost, Vespers, we hear, quote, Of old there was confusion of tongues because of the boldness of the power of the tower builders. End quote. Then, quote, God condemned the infidels. End quote. But at Pentecost, quote, the Spirit of Christ illuminated the fishermen. End quote. At Babel there was a, quote, confusion of tongues. End quote. At Pentecost, quote, the vision of tongues has been renewed. End quote. In the church, as in the New Testament, the gift of tongues is last on the list of gifts, as noted in chapter 12, verses 10 and 28. Temporary, as noted in chapter 13, verse 8, primarily for the edification of the one who speaks, as noted in verse 4, and difficult to understand, as noted in verses 11 and 14. St. John Chrysostom concludes that tongues are, quote, neither altogether useless nor very profitable, end quote. So, boom. Whole lot of context there that modern Pentecostals just kind of gloss right over. Seems to me the few times I've been in a Pentecostal church, it's like a requirement for them that you have to and babble and have this euphoric. It's really silly and embarrassing, to be quite honest with you. And, like any Protestant tradition, they'll be able to cite scripture, I'm sure, to justify their behavior. Well, it says to speak in tongues. And yeah, I think today's reading just here, right now, pretty much completely dunks on that. Saying that you need an interpreter to even make sense of it. Yeah, food for thought. The gospel reading is from the book of Matthew, chapter 17, verses 24 through 27, and chapter 18, verses 1 through 4. When they had come to Capernaum, those who received the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he had come into the house, Jesus anticipated him, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From who do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers?" Peter said to him, "From strangers." Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them for me and you." At that time the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, "Assuredly, I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." All right. Some footnotes from the Orthodox Study Bible. So for the end of chapter 17 there, verses 24 through 27, the temple tax was an annual head tax on all male Jews, except the priests, over 12 years of age for the maintenance of the temple. See Numbers chapter 3, verses 43 through 51. Since Jesus is the Son of God, he is both high priest and, quote, proprietor of the temple, and thus is exempt from the tax. Nevertheless, he pays it anyways, both to avoid unnecessary offense and to show that he has totally identified himself with mankind. And for chapter 18, verses 1 through 4, this question indicates a selfish interest in worldly power. Pointing to a little child As the model of true discipleship, Jesus emphasizes the virtues required for entrance into the kingdom of heaven: humility, dependence, lowliness, simplicity, obedience, and a willingness to love and be loved. In Orthodox iconography, why am I saying that? So, iconography, geez almighty, Saint Ignatius of Antioch is depicted as this child. In certain legends of saints, he is the boy who gave the loaves and fishes, as noted in John chapter 6, verse 9. Well, that is it, everybody. I'm not going to ramble on with too long of a closing statement here. Get this edited together here and uploaded as quick as I can. But yeah, stay cool, whatever part of the world you're in, and please keep me, a sinner, in your prayers. Thank you. Have a blessed weekend.